I knew something was off the moment her brother said my name like it was a punchline he'd been skiving all year. Not a greeting. Not, hey, glad you made it. More like the kind of recognition that comes with context I hadn't been given. He looked at me, then at his sister, then back at me, and smiled with the specific energy of someone who had heard entirely too much. Her name was Celia. She had been my closest friend for 5 years, the person I called when something went wrong, and also when nothing went wrong, and I just needed someone to talk to who wouldn't make it weird. She was the kind of person who remembered things. Not just the big things, the small, inconvenient, specific things. The way I took my coffee, the name of the professor who failed me junior year, the exact combination of circumstances that made me anxious in social situations I couldn't control. She cataloged all of it without ever making me feel like a project. I had been doing an exceptional job of not thinking about what that meant. We met during my second week at a new job in Denver. I'd transferred from a regional office in Ohio. Didn't know anyone, and was trying to figure out where the good lunch spots were within walking distance of downtown. Celia was leaving the same Thai place I was aiming for, holding a paper bag, and she stopped me before I walked in. The larb is gone by noon, she said. I'd go with the noodle soup. I looked at her. Do you work nearby? Same building as you, actually. I've seen you at the elevator. She said it matter-of-factly, without any of the self-consciousness people usually perform when they admit to noticing someone. You look like you've been eating sad desk lunches. That's oddly accurate. The noodle soup is better than whatever you've been settling for. She was right. About the soup and, as it turned out, about most things. After that, we started eating lunch together on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which became every day, which became the kind of easy routine that doesn't announce itself as significant until you're already deep inside it. We worked in different departments, which helped. No weird professional overlap, no politics, no reason to be careful about what we said. We could just talk. And we did. About everything. Her family was from Portland. She had one older brother, Miles, who thought everything was slightly funnier than it actually was. Her parents were the kind of people who hosted things, dinners and holidays and casual weekend gatherings that somehow always had 20 people and a playlist nobody could agree on. She talked about them the way people talk about a place they're glad exists even when it exhausts them. I had told her things I hadn't said out loud to anyone. About the divorce my parents went through when I was 17, and the specific, quiet way it had made me suspicious of assuming anything would stay. About the girl I dated for 2 years in my mid-20s who told me, when she ended it, that I was the most emotionally unavailable person she'd ever met, and how I still wasn't sure if she was right. About the fact that I had started to feel like Denver might actually become home, which was a feeling I didn't fully trust yet. Celia had listened to all of it, not in the way people listen when they're waiting to give advice. The real kind. The kind that makes you feel like what you said actually landed somewhere instead of evaporating. I had told myself, many times, that this was simply what it meant to have a good friend. I was very committed to that explanation. Her parents' house was in a suburb about 40 minutes outside the city, the kind of neighborhood with wide driveways and October decorations that went up in mid-September. Her younger cousin was getting married that fall, and the family had organized a Sunday afternoon get-together. Not the wedding, just a loose, pre-celebration gathering. Lunch, yard games, cousins catching up. Celia had texted me 2 days before. My mom wants you to come. Don't make me tell her you're busy. I had typed back, is this a request or a summons? My mother does not make requests. So I drove out on a Sunday in early October, brought a bottle of wine, because I didn't know what else to bring, and pulled into the driveway to find Celia already standing on the front steps, looking at her phone with the focused expression of someone managing 3 things at once. She looked up when I got out of the car. You're here, she said, like this was mildly surprising. You invited me. My mother invited you, I relayed the message. She glanced at the wine. She's going to love that. I was going to bring flowers, but I couldn't decide. The wine was the right call. She stepped aside to let me in. Forewarning, Miles is already in rare form, and it's barely noon. Define rare form. He found old home videos last night and has been making references nobody else understands since 9 this morning. I followed her into the house, which smelled like something roasting in coffee that had been on too long. the very specific scent of a family gathering that started earlier than planned. The living room had been partially rearranged to accommodate extra chairs. Someone had taped a banner to the wall that said, "Congratulations" in silver letters, slightly crooked on the left side. Celia's mother, Nancy, appeared from the kitchen doorway the moment she heard me come in. Nancy was the kind of woman who had a warmth that felt deliberate without being performed. She had known me for about 8 months, since the first time Celia had dragged me along to one of these Sunday things, and her mother had acted like I was someone she'd been expecting, rather than a plus one who hadn't confirmed until Friday. She had a way of looking at me that I had always attributed to general friendliness. Standing there in her kitchen doorway, holding a dish towel, she smiled with something that looked less like friendliness and more like satisfaction. "There he is," she said. "Hi, Nancy. I'm glad you came." She said it in a tone that carried more weight than the words themselves. Celia's tone shifted almost immediately. "Mom, he literally just walked in. I'm just saying I'm glad." Nancy looked at me for a moment longer than necessary. "Come in. The food's almost ready." I went in. I helped carry things from the kitchen to the back patio because it seemed like the right thing to do, which it was, and also because it gave me something to do with my hands in a house full of people who all knew each other since birth and had that comfortable, overlapping shorthand I could observe but not fully enter. Miles found me by the cooler about 20 minutes in. Miles was 2 years older than Celia, worked in construction management, and had the energy of someone who found most situations inherently amusing. He shook my hand with more enthusiasm than strictly necessary. "The famous one," he said. I looked at him. "Sorry?" He grinned. "Nothing. Just, we've heard a lot." Before I could ask what that meant, someone called him over from across the yard, and he went, still grinning, in the way of a person who knows exactly what they just did and is fine with it. I stood there for a second, trying to decide whether to follow up on that later. The afternoon moved the way those gatherings do when they're working. Slowly, pleasantly, without any single thing demanding full attention. I talked to Celia's father, Robert, about the Broncos for longer than either of us had probably intended. I met two of the cousins and forgot their names immediately. I ate enough of Nancy's pot roast to embarrass myself slightly. Celia and I kept ending up near each other without coordinating it. She'd drift over to refill her drink and stay to finish whatever conversation we'd started. I'd wander toward where she was standing and not really acknowledge that I'd done it on purpose. At one point, we ended up in the same camp chair situation, both watching a cornhole game being taken too seriously, and she leaned over and said quietly, "I'm going to need you to lose dramatically if they ask us to play. Because you want them to feel better? Or because you've already lost to them?" She didn't answer, which was its own answer. It was around 3 in the afternoon when it happened. Nancy had come out to the patio with a plate of something she'd been working on and was talking to two of the aunts near the back door. Celia was standing a few feet away, half listening to a conversation she'd been pulled into and half watching me from across the yard. I noticed the watching, but filed it away. Then Nancy looked up, saw me coming over to drop off my empty plate, and said something to the two women beside her. I was close enough to hear it. "That's the one she can't stop talking about," she said, quietly, conversationally. "The way you'd point out a local landmark to a tourist." I stopped walking. Nancy looked at me with the expression of a woman who had said the thing she intended to say and had no regrets about timing. Celia, beside her, had gone very still. "Mom," Celia said. Her voice was flat, controlled. The voice of someone who had just watched a grenade roll into the room. Nancy looked genuinely unconcerned. "I'm just telling them who you are. You could have just said his name." I said more because there's more to say. Nancy turned back to the aunts. "She talks about this man constantly, his opinions, what he thinks, what he said squeak." She gestured loosely in my direction. "I know his order at the Thai place. I know he used to drive a Civic, but switched to something with better gas mileage. I know more about him than I know about half the people at this table." One of the aunts made a sound that was too entertained to hide. Celia set down her cup, very carefully. "I'm going inside," she said. And she did. She went in through the back door without looking at me. I stood there, with an empty plate in my hand, and the distinct feeling of a person who has just been told something by someone other than the person it concerned. Nancy watched me with a patient, slightly amused expression. She's not actually upset, she said. She looked upset. She's embarrassed. Nancy picked up the was still holding and took it from me. Those are different things. You should probably go check on her. Right, I said. It was the most useful thing anyone had said in the last 2 minutes. The house was quieter inside. I found Celia in the sunroom off the back hallway, which was the kind of room that gets used less than it should, full of plants and a wicker chair and a small table, with a puzzle that hadn't been touched in what looked like months. She was standing near the window with her arms crossed, not looking at anything in particular. She heard me come in. Before you say anything, she said, not turning around, I want to be clear that my mother has no concept of appropriate timing. I don't know. Seemed like she timed it pretty intentionally. That's not better. I stepped into the room. It was late afternoon light, that specific October gold, that made everything look like a photograph of itself. Celia. She turned around. Her face was still flushed in the particular way of someone who has been caught, not in a lie but in something true, which is somehow more disarming. She met my eyes for a second, then looked past me. She talks to you about me that much? Celia exhaled. It wasn't a sigh, exactly. More like the sound of someone releasing an argument they'd been planning to win. Yes, she said. Just that, I let it sit there for a second. Since, she looked at me. That's your first question? Is it the wrong one? She stopped. Unfolded her arms. It's not wrong. It's just very you. Very. Okay, let me gather data before I respond. I'm standing here. I know you are. She moved to the wicker chair and sat down in the arm of it, not quite right, like she needed to do something with her body while she talked. Since a while. Since probably, I don't know. The fall you sprained your ankle and kept working from your apartment for 2 weeks. And I brought you groceries twice and didn't tell you I'd rearranged your schedule so you had fewer evening calls. I stared at her. You did what? I talked to your project lead. Very casually. It wasn't. It's not like I hacked your calendar. I just mentioned that you were dealing with something, and could we possibly move the Thursday calls? You called my project lead. She was very understanding. Celia. It was almost 2 years ago. I sat down on the edge of the puzzle table because there was nowhere else to sit, and I needed a second. The afternoon light was doing something annoying to the room, making everything look significant. Okay, I said. You sound exactly like you did when you got my mom's text about the pot roast. I'm processing. Take your time. She looked at her hands. I'm not going anywhere. I thought about the ankle thing. I had actually wondered at the time why the Thursday calls had stopped piling up. I'd assumed it was the project being slower. I hadn't asked. I don't know why I hadn't asked. And then I started thinking about other things. The time she'd mentioned, very offhandedly, that the person I'd been seeing for a few months had said something that struck Celia as dismissive. I'd gotten mildly defensive, and she'd dropped it. 3 weeks later, that relationship ended for reasons that included, among other things, a pattern of dismissiveness I'd been slow to see. Celia had not said I told you so. She had said, do you want Thai, or do you want something different? The way she always texted after job interviews. Not to ask how it went. Just, how are you? The fact that she remembered my sister's birthday and mine was on the same weekend and had once sent my sister a card through me without me asking. I had filed all of this under good friend. I had a very spacious file. I think I've been kind of an idiot, I said. Celia looked up. That's not the word I'd use. What word would you use? Careful, she said. You've been careful. She held my gaze for a second. I understand it. I really do. You've talked about the stuff with your parents. The thing your ex said about you being unavailable. I think you decided somewhere along the way that whatever you had with someone shouldn't cost you what we had if it went wrong. She said it without any edge, just plainly, like she'd thought about it enough to land on the clean version. Is that wrong? I asked. It's not wrong, she said. It's just, it costs something anyway, just differently. She looked at the window. I've been here the whole time, and I'm still here. So the thing you were protecting didn't actually need that much protecting. The room was quiet in the way October rooms get quiet, a dry, still quiet that makes the small sounds bigger. Somewhere outside, someone laughed at something. A door shut. I looked at her, really looked at her, the way I'd been carefully not doing for what I was now beginning to understand had been a very long time. I compared every person I dated to you, I said. She blinked. Not in a mean way. I didn't even realize I was doing it for a while. but I'd be somewhere with someone and think, Celia would have a better read on this situation. Or, Celia would have said something funnier by now. Or I'd want to text her about something that happened on the date while I was still on the date, which I now recognize as not a healthy sign. Celia was very quiet. The worst one, I said, was when I took someone to that Italian place on Larimer Street. You'd mentioned it, said the pasta was worth the parking situation. I went there with someone else, and the whole time I kept thinking, I should have saved this for Celia. Her expression changed. Something shifted behind it, not dramatically, just the way a room changes when someone finally opens a window. You didn't tell me you went there, she said. I know. You said you'd been downtown and had a nice dinner. I wasn't ready to think too hard about why I hadn't mentioned it. She looked down and then back up. That's a lot to have been carrying around. Yeah. I paused. Although I think you were carrying more. She made a small sound that was almost a laugh. The ankle thing was a little much. In retrospect, the ankle thing was actually very kind. It was compulsive. I saw the schedule and I didn't want you to be stuck inside with back-to-back calls and nowhere to put your leg up. Celia, I know. I should have said something a long time ago. She looked at me with an expression that was tired and fond in equal parts. Which one of us should have? Both of us. But I'm the one who made it harder. You were scared, she said. So was I, for different reasons. I kept thinking, he's the most stable part of my week. If I say something and it goes badly, what do I even do with Tuesdays now? I almost laughed. I thought about that too. Not Tuesdays specifically, see? Mine were Tuesdays. Thai place. You always picked up extra napkins, even though I never used them. You always used them. I never asked for them. You always needed them. She smiled, just slightly. The specific smile of someone being caught being known. I moved from the puzzle table to the other arm of the wicker chair, close enough that we were both perched on the edges of the same furniture, which was not designed for two people but accommodated it. The thing is, I said, none of this actually surprised me. When your mom said it, it confirmed something I'd been refusing to look at directly. For how long? Too long to say out loud without embarrassing myself. Tell me anyway. The Larimer Street dinner. That's when I stopped being able to pretend I didn't know. She did the math quietly. That was 8 months ago. I know. You went to that restaurant 8 months ago and spent the next 8 months. Being very good at not bringing it up, yes, she exhaled, looked at the ceiling. We are both so bad at this, genuinely bad. My mother is going to be so smug. She already is. She took my plate. Celia covered her face with one hand. Oh no. Very purposeful plate removal. She's going to bring this up at every family event until one of us dies. She's going to tell this story at your cousin's wedding. She's going to tell it at the reception. During the actual toasts. She'd never. She absolutely would. I looked at her. She still had her hand partially over her face. I reached over and gently moved it. She let me. Her eyes were brighter than the light in the room accounted for, and she had the expression of someone who had been holding a breath for long enough that letting it go felt like a whole body thing. I don't want to keep mislabeling this, I said. What does that mean? Practically speaking, it means I want to take you to that restaurant on Larimer Street and actually be present for it this time. She looked at me for a long moment. The parking is a nightmare, she said. I know. You have to get there before 6:30. I know. You told me. She smiled, and it was different from the other ones. Less careful, less managed. The kind of smile that shows up when someone stops trying to be okay and just is. I kissed her. Not because the moment demanded it, but because it was the natural conclusion of a conversation that had been trying to happen for the better part of a year. It was quiet and unperformed, and felt less like a beginning than like an answer to something that had always been there. When I pulled back, she didn't move away. Okay, she said softly. Yeah, my mother cannot know she was right. Your mother is already certain she was right. She cannot have confirmation. Celia, I'm serious. She's been waiting for this. If we walk out there looking like this, she will never be a reasonable person again. She was never a reasonable person. She was adjacent to reasonable. That's over now. I laughed. She did too, and it broke the last tension in the room entirely. We stayed in the sunroom for another few minutes, mostly because neither of us was ready to hand the moment over to anyone else just yet. We talked about nothing important, whether we should get dinner somewhere on the drive back, whether the wicker chair was as structurally unsound as it felt, whether Miles had planned his comment by the cooler, or if it had just been opportunistic. Opportunistic, Celia said, but informed opportunism. He knew. Everyone knew. Everyone except you. I knew. I just needed longer to do something about it. She leaned into me slightly. For the record, I wasn't going to say anything either. I know. We could have gone years. We were going years. She laughed again, quieter this time. Fair. When we finally went back outside, Nancy looked up from across the patio, registered whatever she saw in our faces, and smiled the slow, deliberate smile of a woman who had been correct and knew it. She said nothing. She did not need to. Miles, to his credit, only said, "Took you long enough," and then immediately went back to his conversation. Robert looked up from the grill, looked at both of us, blinked once, and nodded in a way that suggested he was registering information he'd been expecting and returning to his actual priority, which was the burgers. The rest of the afternoon continued without any fanfare. The cornhole game resumed. Someone found a playlist everyone could tolerate. The October light went gold, and then amber, and then the kind of deep blue that means dinner is real and the evening has officially started. Celia sat beside me through all of it. At one point, her mother came over with 2 pieces of pie on separate plates. Neither of us had asked for pie, set them down without comment, and walked away. Celia looked at the pie and then at me. "I told you," she said. "She won. She is going to be winning for the rest of our lives." I picked up the fork. The pie is probably good, though. It was. 3 weeks later, we went back to the Italian place on Larimer Street. We got there at 6:15, which was exactly right. The pasta was everything she'd said it was. I was entirely present for it. And at some point after the bread arrived and before the main course, I looked across the table and thought, I have been trying to get here for a long time. I just called it something else.